And so,
Oh, cool. Now, is this a podcast? People can't
yeah,
see me, right? They can't see me.
right now we can some can see you, and we're
Oh,
live right now.
oh, do I look okay?
Yes, you look good. You're ready to rock and roll.
Okay.
And everybody, you're listening to United Public Radio 107.7. This is a Church of Mabus Radio. Year 13. 13 years
Wow.
of trucking. And one of the main reasons, of course, I know I've told this story a million times and it probably bores some of you to tears, but the main reason I do the show is because I had a lot of weird stuff happen after when I was 17, testicular cancer, chemo, went through that. Then my father died several years later, and I started to have a lot of weird paranormal experiences, from seeing beings of light to seeing native ghosts in full attire. uh, there's some Cherokee roots in my family, supposedly. I've seen a great grandmother in a picture, and she looked like she was like in the attire. So, but I know DNA wise, I don't. It's hard to pick it up for some reason. But I have seen the photographs, and I think there's something to that in people that have these experiences on some level. But also some weird UFO stuff, and basically it just led to doing a show. And next thing you know, I'm interviewing nuclear physicists and the British Ministry of Defense, Nick Pope, and all these people that I see on TV, and started interviewing them to find out what happened. What the hell did I just see? And even with witnesses, and that's the journey. And we've had a lot of spiritual guests on the shamanism subject, and tonight's guest is Erica M. Elliot, Medicine and Miracles in the High Desert, My Life Among the Navajo People. And it's great to have you here, Erica.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I'm glad to be here.
It's definitely, I love this kind of subject matter. And when it comes to the star people and UFOs and Bigfoot, and when they get into that, that's when you're getting the truth smacked on your face when they start talking about that stuff. That's my go to for sure. Well, I guess what got you involved with the Navajo? You were a teacher. What background wise can you give
Oh,
us?
okay. It was really by a fluke that I ended up there. I had I had lived all over the world because my father was in the military. I graduated from high school in Germany and then went to college in the Midwest. And I decided I wanted to be a school teacher. So when I graduated, I looked through the trade journals and they all looked really uninteresting. They didn't call to me, so to speak. But one um, advertisement really caught my attention. The Bureau of Indian Affairs was looking for a fourth grade teacher in a boarding school in the middle of nowhere in Arizona near Canyon de Chelly. And I thought, this is where I need to go. An inner compass said, you need to go there. And I told my friends and my family, and they thought I was really crazy. I mean, why would I want to go there? It's in the middle of nowhere. And boarding schools had a very bad reputation for the way they treated Native Americans, raping girls, abusing kids, punishing them when they spoke their own language. And so they said, you're gonna hate it there. And so I said, well, I don't know. I just have a feeling this is what I should do. I know it doesn't make any sense. So I drove out there, and wow, I'd never been to the West, and it was just like spectacular scenery. But then I got to the actual place where I would teach school. It looked like a dump. I mean, I didn't have the trained eyes to uh, be in a desert, so everything just looked like various shades of brown. And the school looked like a dilapidated old warehouse or something. There was just one road through the town. It had one gas station, one junk food store where they shop for groceries, and one little restaurant, and that was it. And I thought, oh boy, God, this doesn't look very promising. And so I pulled up and I introduced myself to the principal. And I was really young compared. All the other teachers were old. I mean, they were 55. I was like 23, and they seemed old to me. And he introduced me to them. and I sat and talked with them in the teacher's lounge, and they really didn't like being there, and couldn't wait to get their pension and go back home to where Louisiana or wherever, the countries the states they were from. And they told me, actually, I'm not kidding you, they told me that the kids couldn't learn, that they just couldn't learn. I thought, wow, that that's shocking what they just said. And so anyway, I went into the classroom and I had a teacher aide, a Navajo teacher aide assigned to me. Her name was Donna Scott. And she was very versed in the white world and her traditional world of the Navajos. Because she lived on army bases, her father was a very famous Navajo. You might have heard of him, Carl Gorman. He was a code talker. And do you know about the code talkers?
Yes,
It was
yes.
the only code that was never broken by the Japanese and Germans. And I discovered why it was never broken, because it is an impossibly difficult language. And it has strange sounds that don't exist in English, like guttural sounds, clicking sounds, and so forth. And so she knew about the white world, but she was very Navajo in that she was shy, and she was very soft spoken and not intervening much. She saw how much I struggled trying to relate to the students. They were in the fourth grade and didn't speak English. I thought, how is that possible? You don't speak English when you're in the fourth grade? And they wouldn't look at me or talk to me. And I found out later that I was making one cultural mistake after another. I was just full of blunders. And it's because I got no orientation from the school about Navajo culture. I knew nothing, completely nothing about the people I was with. And day after day, I'd go in there, and it was just me reading out of some stupid Dick and Jane book, and they weren't interested and didn't understand, wouldn't talk. And finally, at the end of the week, I called my father. I said, you know what? I think I really made a big mistake. I don't belong here. They don't talk to me, even on the street. Nobody says hello. I don't like it here. I'm going home. And he said, which thank God he said this, he said, you can't judge a person or a place or a land or culture in a week. He said, what can you tell? Nothing. He said, why don't you stay 3 months? And then if you're unhappy, you come back home and look for a job back east. I said, oh, okay, God, how am I going to make it through 3 months of this? And that very same day, the very next day, the teacher aide, Donna Scott, saw me struggle and struggle. And she came up to me and said, I see how much you're really trying. The other teachers, they don't seem to care. You're really trying hard, and I want to help you. And so I think the best thing you could do is learn a few words of Navajo. So I'd like to, if you want to, I'll teach you like a few sentences to say to the kids tomorrow morning. And I think that will break the ice. And so she taught me these sounds, and there's no dictionary. I had to listen really carefully to these really bizarre sounds. And I practiced late into the night in my little apartment. And then the next day I showed up to school, and as usual, they were all looking downward, not at me. And I started speaking Navajo. I don't know, I must have sounded ridiculous because the sounds were so hard. I said, Elliot, and I said, hello. I thought I said, hello, my children. My name is Miss Elliot. What's your name and where are you from? And everybody looked up like totally stunned, looked me right into the face. And then one little girl put her hand across her mouth and started giggling. And
Uh
the
oh.
whole room burst out laughing. And that marked the point where everything changed. I totally fell in love with those kids from that moment forward. And the bravest boy in the class came up to me. He's the one that knew the most English, which was just a few words. and he couldn't pronounce my name, Elliot. So he came up and said, Elliot, take me home. I looked at Donna Scott and I said, what does he mean, take me home? And she said, he wants you to check him out of the boarding school. And I said to the boy, Billy Begay, this weekend? And he said, oh, that means yes in Navajo. Oh. And I said, uh, you mean drive you to your parents' Hogan? That's their traditional house. He said, oh. And I looked at Dawn. I said, can I check out these kids? She said, yeah, nobody does it, but you just have to fill out some paperwork, and then they have to be back by Sunday evening. So I told Billy, I'll take you. And so I took him that weekend, and I had the time of my life. We were riding bareback horses in the arroyo. We were exploring the red rocks, climbing up and looking at Anasazi ruins from the ancient people in the caves. And the family spoke no English at all, and they were making jokes. And I mean, Navajos have a tremendous sense of humor. It's not our humor, but it's still funny. And I would laugh, even though I had no idea what they're saying. And then they'd laugh harder, and I'd laugh harder. And pretty soon we were just laughing and not having a clue what the other was saying. And but what happened was when we came back on Sunday, the whole school on Monday heard about our adventure, and I decided that I was not going to use the curriculum that all the other teachers used because the kids couldn't relate to Dick and Jane kind of stories. And so I decided I was going to make our own curriculum. So I asked the kids to draw a picture of the scene of me at Billy Begay's house, because they all knew where he lived and stuff like that. And I said, under the picture, you write 2 sentences. And most of them couldn't do that. But one kid drew this beautiful picture of this horse racing on the bottom of the canyon, and there was this white girl on top clinging to the mane for dear life, bareback, with a ponytail streaming straight back. And under the picture, he put my teacher, Teechir. And from that moment, the kids wanted desperately to learn English because they wanted me to know about them. So when Donna Scott said, to try to make an overture by speaking their language, she was really right. Because then they were so warmed up to me. They wanted me to know everything about how many sheep they had, their goats, their grandmother, and so forth. And so they turned out to be, unlike what those white women teachers said, they actually were incredibly smart. It's just, they didn't have a chance to show it. And they learned English so fast that what I'm about to tell you is almost too hard to believe, but I have a newspaper clipping to prove it. 3 of those kids won regional speech contests at the end of the year. That's how fast they learned English. It was stunning. And it told me that when you love somebody, you bring out the best in them. And those kids knew I loved them. And they had strong feelings for me too. So every weekend I went to a different kid's house, and I saw ceremonies that white people have never seen and probably never will. And I was welcomed into all their ceremonies. And by this time, I had started to learn some Navajo. And I just was so transformed by this experience that I had to take a deep dive into a very foreign culture. In America, who would have known that this very rich culture is right here in the midst of our country, and so few people knew about it. This was 50 years ago, when Navajos were very traditional, knew all their songs, spoke their language fluently. Medicine men did most of the healing and stuff like that. So if you have any questions, I can take them now, but then I'd like to tell you about paranormal experiences because that's what you are interested in. And
Yeah.
man, I saw so many paranormal experiences when I was
Awesome.
there that I documented all of them in my diary because they were so strange that I had no way to explain them with my logical mind. I could not come up with an explanation, but I knew they're real because I lived it. So I can't pretend it didn't happen. So I documented the whole thing, and I didn't want to write about it, even though my sister said this would be a great story. You should write this, and I said no, I'm not going to. And the reason why is back then, I don't think anyone would have believed me. And so it's very disheartening when you say something like, if you've seen a UFO and nobody believes you, that feels horrible. And so I was trying to avoid that feeling of people not believing me, so I didn't write it. Then when I matured somewhat as a person and I didn't care if people didn't believe me, then I was too busy being a medical doctor to sit down and write a story. So I finally wrote this story during all this political divisiveness. I finally said, I have to write this book because it's a healing story. It's about crossing the cultural divide. So, again, if you have any questions, ask me now and then we'll dive into the paranormal.
Definitely. Well, I mean, I'm very interested in their spirituality. I know it's as complex, and you don't have to spend like a million years on it or anything. But what was some of the things that you learned about their spirituality? Is it like the Great Spirit? I know it's different. They probably have a different name for it. But what are some
Well,
things that you learned?
I'll just make it really simple to understand because it's very complex. Actually, it's very complex. But I'll give you the bottom line. They are incredible back then. Remember, this is 50 years ago when they're still very traditional. They're very connected with animals and with the land. I mean, deeply connected so that they could feel things happen. They could feel when there was a coyote in the area, just feel it without even seeing it. And they had a relationship with ravens and all sorts of animals. And also, another thing is their whole basis of their religion is remaining in harmony with yourself. It's called Hojon. It's called the beauty way, and it has nothing to do with cosmetics. The beauty way means you're in balance with yourself, with your family, with your clan, with your community. Clans are terribly important. When you go up to a white person, you say, "What do you? Where do you live? What do you do?" They say, "Oh, I'm from Chicago and I work in an auto plant," and stuff like that. A Navajo, in those days, you go up to Navajo and you ask about them. They tell you about their land and they tell you about the clan on the mother's side and the clan on the father's side. And they're so relational. Like if you want to show affection to somebody, you call them my brother or my sister or my grandfather or something like that. That shows, even though you're not related, that shows affection. And sometimes with their odd sense of humor that I find really funny, but they mix up the terms. They'll call a little boy my grandfather and they think that's really funny. And so anyway, relationships are very important. And white culture, people like to be rugged individuals and stick out as individuals. They like to be the richest, the smartest, the this, the that, the most clever, the most something, the most beautiful, or something. Navajos in that era, they did not want to stick out because their whole thing was community, and also sticking out made you vulnerable to witchcraft. I think they used witchcraft to keep people in their place, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know this is one subject you brought up that was I always find interesting, though it kind of scares me on some level, is the Skinwalker situation. And a lot of us have kept up with Skinwalker Ranch in Utah and the show on the History Channel, and that gets pretty crazy with George Knapp from Coast to Coast and that Colin Kelleher that wrote the book Hunt for the Skinwalker. And recently, actually, there was a book that came out, a sequel to that Skinwalker book by George Knapp and the other Arthur, called Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. And what it gets into is Skinwalker Ranch at some point was bought by Robert Bigelow, the space aerospace tyrant, space tyrant guy,
Hmm.
and they studied it by the government. And some of this phenomenon that some of the natives believed that place was cursed, and because there was Skinwalker stuff, Bigfoot stuff, UFO stuff, but they actually said some of that phenomenon followed the military home, and they began to have things that in their house happen that were scary with children and strange things like that. So that subject we've talked about many times. So, but I would definitely like to hear what your situation
Yeah,
was with that too.
I had firsthand experience, which was
And
absolutely,
that stuff is really
yeah,
terrifying.
it's
It really
absolutely
is.
so terrifying. I can't tell you. And so I had multiple little encounters. I'm going to jump to one, a really quick encounter that so scared me. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. And so I was driving to Gallup. Gallup, New Mexico is 2 hours away from where I live. That's where I went to get groceries and stuff. And so I was driving there and I was just on the outskirts and it was dark. It was dark. And I was rolling to a stop at a stop sign and I I I saw I saw this thing. I mean, it looked like, I don't know what it looked like. It looked like a man bending over, and he had a hairy chest, and he had a skin over him, and he had some hair on his face. And I actually hit him by mistake, and he went right up on the hood, and he looked through the glass right at me. I thought I was going to die. It was so scary. And then he slid back off and he loped away. I just thought, wow, Jesus, what just happened? What just happened? So that was absolutely terrifying.
That is scary, but
And I was so freaked out. I turned around and went home. I drove all the way home. I never went continued because I was so rattled by that experience. So rattled, and I had no way to, as a white girl, to make sense out of it, from anyway. So the kids in my class, I told them about the experience, and they educated me about skinwalkers. They said these skinwalkers, um, they are people who were part of the community at one time, and then they did something really bad. And in Navajo culture, something really bad, the worst thing you can do is to harm somebody in your clan. That's the worst thing you can do. And um, they say that when they do that, they become skinwalkers, and then they try to harm you. And I said to them, am I in danger because, I live on the first floor of this government housing? Will they come and get me? And the kid said, no, no, they won't get you. You're a Bilagana. You're a white. And I said, well, why will they not get me? And they said, they're not interested in you. You're not a Navajo. And they'll only hurt you if you accidentally get in their way, and then you could get really hurt. And then they were telling me all these experiences they'd have where sheep would die, and there'd be screaming dogs and stuff when they'd come around and do bad things. And I said, why would they do bad things? And they said, well, if somebody was getting too rich or this and that, it's to keep them in their place, and to punish them and stuff like that, scare them. And after they told me all these details, here's what happened that also scared me to death. Some Mormon teachers, student teachers, knocked on my door and said, you had said you'd take us into the canyon and show us the canyon, and we're leaving tomorrow. Can we do it tonight? I said, what? It's nighttime. We're not supposed to go into the canyon at night. That's what my kids said. They said the werewolves are all over the canyon in the night, and you got to stay away from the canyon. And they begged me, almost in tears. They said, "We really want to see Canyon de Chelly." I said, "But you've been here a month doing student teaching. Why now?" And they said, "Well, we just put it off, but please." So I reluctantly said, "Okay," but I felt I was doing something wrong. But I went, and the moon was pretty bright, so we could see what we're doing. We parked on the top of the rim of Canyon de Chelly, and then we went down one of the little trails. And all of a sudden, I saw across the canyon in a cave that I was familiar with that cave. It was the Anasazis used to live there, the ancient ones. And there was a fire going in the cave way up high. And I said, "Look at that," to the girls. And they said, "Well, it's probably just a camper who's up there." I said, "No, it's not a camper. People aren't allowed to camp in the canyon. It's not a camper." And they didn't seem to be concerned at all. And then I saw this shadow on the back of the cave moving like a dance, like a ceremonial dance, but it's just the shadow. And I said, "Look, there's somebody in there." And again, they were just yakking away, chattering. And I said, "Can you stop talking so much? Can you please whisper? We don't want to get in trouble. There's something going on up there. There's some ceremony or something." And and then they kept walking, and then I heard a scream by some animals. They're in a corral down below. An old lady lived there, and the animals screamed. There was something in there. I mean, it was like some wild animal was doing something bad to these animals. They're screaming out, and so we all stopped and listened. Now the girls were scared. Now they were starting to get scared, and appropriately scared. And then I saw this thing that looked like a small horse or a huge dog loping along like that, sort of half bent over, half crouched, and it looked like he had something on its back. And I said, "That's a skinwalker. Let's get out of here." And so now the girls were really scared. So we ran as fast as we could up to the parked car. We were really scared. And I drove them back and dropped them off. And then I had so much adrenaline in me. There's no way I could go to bed, even though it's time to go to bed. I was too hyped up. And so I went to visit a friend who was a school teacher at the public school, which was very different from the boarding school, the public school. And I went to his trailer, and the light was still on. He was grading papers. So I knocked on the door, and he invited me in, and I told him what happened. And he didn't believe me. And I don't, at that age I was, 23, it was so offensive to me and hurtful when people didn't believe what I was saying, because it was out of their realities that they didn't believe me. So I was so offended. That was a stronger emotion than my fear. So I said, "Do you want me to take you there and show you?" And he said, "Yeah, show me." And so, we drove there. I was really scared, but I was going to prove that I was telling the truth at all costs, even if I was scared to death. And so we went down, and I said, "Don't talk." We went down the trail, and we got to the bottom. We went through all this dry cornfields. They were rustling, making a lot of noise, which was unnerving. I was scared. I was hyperventilating the whole time. I was so scared. And then there was a big talus slope. You know what that is? All this rock debris coming when there's erosion, and then the cave. And so he said, I'm going up to see what's in that cave." I said, "No, you shouldn't do that. There's somebody in there. And we saw a campfire up there." And he said, "No, I don't believe it. I'm going to go up there." So he started scrambling up, and all this rock slid down. He kept going. And then he heard a noise in the cave, and he almost fell off the slope. And he said, "Did you hear that?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "It's probably just a mountain lion." I said, "There are no mountain lions in Canyon de Chelly." And so he kept going, and then he heard this booming voice that said, "Get the fuck out of here, white boy." And he almost passed out. He almost fell off the Taylor slope. And we ran so fast across the bottom of the canyon and up the other side to the car. And now he believed me.
And one thing I have to wonder about them is, and you may not know the answer to this, but maybe you can just give some details. I know they say, I've heard that you've had to hurt someone before to become one, like in your family. I interviewed a cryptozoologist. He passed away, J.C. Johnson, and he had said that that was one way to harm someone. But what I wonder, and you may or may not know the answer to this, is once you do that, do you become it like right then, or do you have to die? Because it seems like they're supernatural on some level. Is that what you think? Do you think they're paranormal?
I think it's right then. And I think, here's what I think.
Creepy.
I think when you have a really strong belief system, you can make your whole energy can make things happen. I mean, these are strong beliefs about the werewolf, strong beliefs. And so if you let's say I've never known a woman werewolf, but let's say I'm a man and I am jealous of an in-law, let's say, and I murder him. Then because I'm part of the culture, I'm so much part of the culture, I'm sort of predestined to do bad things now. And it's like I almost don't have my own will, that I have to do terrible things now because I'm a werewolf.
It's definitely a trip for sure. No doubt about it. Jay, you got any questions?
Yeah, I actually was just about to look something up on the Wikipedia there real quick for some more information. Yeah, it's funny that it's not just Native American tribes. It's all over the place that have these different accounts of strange beings, whether it's a skinwalker or a Sasquatch, or and some people might even say aliens and visitors from other planets. But the one thing that seems to be consistent across all of those things is that they're A, giant, and B, sometimes insect-like. So what can you say about that? Because that intrigues. There's lots of stories about giants, Jack and the Giant Killer and all that, but giant insects, I mean, that's kind of a scary subject. And as far as our science goes, the biggest creatures on the planet before us were lizards. So where does that fear come from, and what can you say about the insect and the giant insect lore that goes through? I think it's the Hopi that have the biggest one.
That's more Hopi, and prophecies are more Hopi. People ask me, what did the Navajo say as prophecies? That wasn't their big forte. I mean, they had general prophecies like we're going to suffer an awful lot, and many of us are not going to make it through, and some will. And I mean, they don't go any much farther than that. But the Hopis have all sorts of prophecies, very complex, very detailed. And so those giants and insects things sound more like from a Pueblo, like Hopi or Tewa, Zuni, a Hopi Pueblo than Navajo. It doesn't sound Navajo.
Yeah, I have no idea. As far as the UFOs are concerned and the aliens, that theme is redundant throughout the planet. It doesn't matter who you talk to, whether it's an abductee or a researcher.
Oh yeah,
all the way around the planet. There's those three themes come up. The aliens are either reptilian, insectoid, or some strange gray alien.
Navajos have seen UFOs. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I don't doubt that. Yeah.
Yeah. They've seen UFOs.
Mm-hmm. And is it they that call them the Star People, or is that the Hopi?
That's the Hopi.
It's the Hopi again? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, you can see how far my knowledge goes.
No, but Hopis have a very complex culture. And Navajos are more simple. Not as complex.
So the Hopi would be more technologically inclined than the Navajo?
Yeah. I mean, from that era, traditionally, yeah.
Well, one of the things I find interesting also is that the story of Devil's Tower, and I may not have the right tribe again.
That's a different tribe. That's Wyoming.
Is it Wyoming?
Mm-hmm.
Have you looked into how close it is to the story of Apollo and his 7 daughters?
No,
I mean, it's
no.
almost exact, except for the fact that they didn't make Devil's Tower in the Greek version of the story, but the Greek version of the story and the Native American version of the story are so close, and these people never had any kind of, as far as we know, no scientific proof that they had any kind of contact. How do they get those stories so close? It just amazes me how
it gives me
amazing just the exactness of it.
it gives me the chills because it makes me feel we're all connected. We're all connected.
There has to be.
Yeah,
There's no other explanation. I mean, the stories are so close
yeah.
that there's no other explanation. That someone traveled the globe with this
I
story.
know.
Like, hey, look at this.
I love that. I love that. And it to me it just says we're all related.
Yeah, I have to agree. I did some research in college for a class on Asian art, and I was actually able to follow an Asian type of rope art from Japan all the way across the Pacific through the Americas and then back over into Europe. And when it got into Europe, in Greece, I think was its final destination. In Greece, you see on the like a Italian restaurant, they have those paper placemats with a little L-shaped squiggly line that goes all the way around the border.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah,
know what I'm talking about?
yeah.
Okay, I traced that design from Japan all the way through North America and all the way
Well,
across to
there you
Europe
go.
with
Because
just
you're
artwork from the Native Americans and everything. It was
yeah,
amazing. I couldn't
you're
believe how
tracing the migration is what you're tracing.
yeah
You're tracing the
with the
migration.
art with
Yeah,
the
it's
with the with
that's
the
very
rope
very
art.
cool. That's very cool.
It was very exciting to find that out and it was just a theory. I was just like I've seen these designs and I just want to trace where they came from and the oldest versions I could find were in Japan.
What
And then the latest, the most common or most recent versions started in Europe. And then it's like, well, there's got to be more to it. So I found out that there was a lot of breeding going on. So most of America's South and North America's native populations are
yeah,
very Asian. Their
that's
DNA
right.
is almost
That's right.
100% Asian.
Jay, I can't wait to tell you something. So, when I was there, um, it was at a time when Navajos are still very traditional, and there's many 100% purebred, so to speak, Navajos without white blood, and so they had their distinct features. Okay, when I went to Nepal, when I took a semester from medical school to learn about medicine in other countries. So I went to Nepal and India for a semester. And when I was in Nepal, I hiked around Annapurna, and there were tons of Tibetan communities there, tons. And they were like refugees against when the Chinese invaded their country. A lot of them left. And because the Chinese and the Tibetans, their culture clashed completely. And what first of all, I was stunned and I found myself just staring at these Tibetans. I couldn't stop staring. And I said, they look exactly like the pure Navajos who haven't, their blood hasn't been diluted. They looked identical. I was so stunned. And I almost felt like talking Navajo to them. I learned Navajo eventually, and I almost felt like to talk with them. But they invited me to one of their ceremonies, and it was identical to one of the ceremonies I had seen. They were sand paintings, and they were the same exact concept where you do the whole universe with the different colored sands and you have the patient in there and then you put the sands after you wreck your nice creation by putting the sands on the patient who's sick. And that's exactly what they did. I could not believe it. And so, yes, very Asian, very Asian. And some of the traits were so Asian back there. It's less and less now that Navajos are less traditional. But back then, they acted so much like Asians. And how do I know? Because my father lived in Korea. He worked 2 years. He was secretary of the United Nations peacekeeping force between North and South Korea. And he befriended so many Koreans, and he paid for them to come to the States and go to school here, to college and stuff. And so I got to know them, and some of their behavior was identical to the traditional Navajos. They're very deferential, they're very respectful, and they don't look you in the eye unless you're very good friends or unless they're really angry about something. They're very shy, and they don't speak up much until they really know you. And so that's why when I came the first few weeks, the students did not talk to me. They were just incredibly shy, and they didn't speak English. But I misread all those cultural clues. I didn't know how to interpret them. And when I look back, I made one cultural mistake after another. And, but anyway, yes, very connected with Asia, very connected. Yeah.
Yeah, it blew my mind when I found that out. And then what do you call it? The Human Genome Project confirmed it, because they said that they proved that the DNA had traced around from the Asians into North and South America. And I was like, woohoo! You know, and I did that without a computer back in the 90s in college.
That's pretty good, Jay. That's really good. Yeah, really good.
Yeah.
So if you want me to tell you about some miracles, that seems to fit your genre, the paranormal, because this was so out of the realm of the ordinary, what I experienced with the peyote ceremonies. Would you like me to talk about it?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, I'll tell you a little bit about the Native American church, which is the peyote. They use it to pray and for healing ceremonies. They do not condone using it for recreation at all. And they go to Texas once a month. It's the government has at that time totally legalized it. Go and harvest on some rancher's land the peyote cactus, the button, and so forth, and bring it back and prepare it for the ceremonies. And peyote, the Native American church, is not native to Navajos. It's an adopted religion. It is not their traditional religion. The traditional religion is run by medicine men, and this borrowed religion is run by roadmen. That's what they're called, roadmen. And the tribe that first used the peyote was the Sioux, the Lakota. It was during a time when they're being massacred, and it was like genocide, and they were suffering so much from the cold and starvation, and from the white settlers massacring them. And so they turned to the peyote for comfort and solace, and that's what helped them survive these dreadful times they were in. And then other tribes got very interested in it. The Navajos became very interested. That was in the late 1800s, and then by the early 1900s it started to spread to other tribes and to help them cope with some of the things they had to cope with. And so after I'd only been there for about a month, they saw, so many of the Navajos saw how hard I was trying to learn about their culture and stuff. And they were so kind to me and so generous that one family wanted to, quote, adopt me, and unofficially. And I was supposed to call them by relational terms. Like the woman was called Shema, which means my mother. And I was supposed to call the little children my children, Shalchina, and stuff like that. And so then once we got really close, they said, we know it's illegal for white people to attend in that era, attend the peyote ceremonies. We'd like to invite you to go. And I was kind of scared because I knew it was hallucinogenic. I knew it was, they call it plant medicine. They say take the medicine, which means the peyote. And so I was a bit scared, and I didn't know what to expect, but I could see how much love they were showing towards me. And so I said, okay. And then they said, you can't wear white men's clothes. You have to dress like a Navajo. And so they provided, a satin skirt, a velvet blouse. Actually, I made some of it myself with a sewing machine. And then beautiful sash belt and lots of silver and dangling from everywhere and turquoise. And then I had long hair and they made it into a Navajo knot. So I looked like, wow, I looked like I was going to a Navajo prom or something. And, and so, and so we filed in and she sat next to me and she said, don't worry, I'll tell you what to do. Don't, just do what I say. And I said, okay. And so, and the roadman sat over here facing the east, and it was all very ceremonial. Everybody had their place and they had sort of what goes on. And this one was for a baby that was sick. The baby was very sick, had that copper colored skin. When dark skinned people are having a fever, it looked kind of copper colored, and the eyes were glazed, full of mucus, crying, fussy. And so the peyote went around in three forms: in a button form, a tea, and a powder. And my Navajo mother said that don't worry if I throw up, because she said that's the evil coming out of you. And so I tried not to throw up because I didn't want anyone to know I was evil. And so I would go try to swallow it, but it tasted terrible to me. But I wanted to participate, so I drank the tea, the powder, chewed on the thing. It was so bitter. And so, but anyway, so at some point, we passed around what looked like a joint. It was a hand-rolled cigarette with all herbs that were gathered from the San Francisco peaks above Flagstaff, which is now a ski area. But that's where the medicine men used to go and get their healing herbs. And so it was rolled into a cigarette. And what you do is you breathe in, exhale, and then you say a prayer. And you go around and you do it. And so after my Navajo mother did it, she passed it to me and said, pass, in English, pass it on. So I passed it on. And she was talking to me in English because I had just learned a tiny bit of Navajo. I didn't know much, a few sentences, really, because I had just gotten there. And it was such a hard language, man. Even though I'm a linguist, I'd never run into a language like that, ever. And so I took the thing, the cigarette, and I did not pass it on. And by now I was really pretty much feeling the effects of the peyote. And I inhaled, exhaled. And then what happened is I started to pray in Navajo. A prayer I'd never heard before. And I didn't even speak Navajo. And I was speaking fluent Navajo. And while I was speaking, I was thinking, this is not real. I'm in a dream. But the dream feels more real than real life. But it's the peyote that's making me think that this is real. It's not real. And that was, and finally, finally I handed it on to the next person. And then something really weird happened. I was looking at a ring on my finger, and I didn't know why the ring was on my finger. It was a real ring. I could feel it. But why was a ring on my finger? And I thought, oh, it's a wedding ring. I'm married to somebody, but I don't know who I'm married to. And then everybody laughed. I hadn't said a word. I was thinking these things. I hadn't said anything. And they all laughed and they were all looking at me. And then I thought to myself, no one is ever going to believe what just happened. And then that was not out loud. That was a thought. And the roadman said out loud, no, they won't believe you. You don't have to talk about it. In fact, it's better you don't talk about it. I just thought, oh, wow, I am so confused. I think I had too much peyote. I don't know what's real anymore. And so then the water drum, it's a little metal drum with a hide stretched over it, and it has water, and it makes this unearthly sound when you beat on it. and then they beat it so it's like almost the pulse of life, boom, 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 boom. And so again, my Navajo mother, after she sang her sacred song, she passed it to me and said, "Pass it on." And I didn't pass it on. I put it down there just in front of my legs where I was sitting, and I started beating, and I started singing, "Hey nay young, hey nay yo, hey yo." I started singing a Navajo prayer song I never heard of before. I thought, oh my God, my head is so messed up. I don't know what's what. This sure seems real, but it can't possibly be real. So anyway, eventually the night passed, and I looked at the baby, and the baby was smiling, gurgling, had normal colored skin, looked completely fine, was peaceful. I thought, wow, the baby's healed. So anyway, morning came, and we filed out, and we touched our forehead to the earth, and then we fanned ourselves with the eagle feather fan. And then we filed into the house nearby. It was in a cinder block house where some women had stayed up all night to make breakfast. And there was a sheet spread out on the floor. And we sat on the dirt floor on the sheet all around this big feast of mutton stew, fry bread, canned peaches, and stuff. And the roadman started talking to me, looking right into my eyes and talking nonstop in Navajo. And the peyote had worn off. I didn't have any idea what he was saying, nothing. And I started feeling really uncomfortable because he just kept talking to me, and everybody was looking at me. And finally, I just said, you know, I don't speak Navajo. I'm so sorry. I don't know what you're saying. And everybody burst out laughing. And he said, "You sure talked up a storm last night, and it was all in Navajo." I said, "Oh my God. Oh my God, how did that happen?" You see, and then I wrote that in my diary, and I said, I'm not telling anybody because they'll never, ever believe me. And now, of course, I tell everybody because I don't care if people believe me or not. I know I'm telling the truth. But people in the audience, when I tell about this story, they say, how do you make sense out of it? And I said, well, there's lots of theories. Quantum physicists have their own idea, but I'm going to be really transparent with you. I don't know, but I know it was real. I know it happened, but if I said something, I'd be making it up, and I don't want to do that. So the answer is I don't know. So before we go on to some other miracles, I would just like to hear from you, Jay and Jeffrey, about your thoughts about that.
It's fascinating to me that I'm not as into the spiritual and shaman side of things as Jeff is. I came in more on the UFO side of things, UFO and Bigfoot, but we don't have all the answers. There are probably a few people on this planet who have most of the answers, if not all of them. And I think if we were to get those answers, the way that the Navajo and the other peaceful tribes, well, the way they act today, is probably the way we should have been acting the whole time. But because some people keep the secrets, we don't all get to share it. But there's some beautiful stories that come out of the Navajo communities and Native American communities.
Yeah,
I don't have a strong opinion on them other than it fascinates me.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I spent years trying to figure it out, and I just couldn't. Jeffrey, what do you think?
Well, just the fact that, during the peyote ceremony, it's kind of like, you tapped into their consciousness, I guess,
Yeah,
on some level. It's kind of like a information, like they say, the Akashic records and stuff like that, a database, sort of. You've connected into their soul, and then you spoke the language.
that's what the quantum physicists say. They say it's all out there, and we just don't know how to access it. And on the peyote, they explained to me, I didn't have any constructs that would say this isn't possible because you let down all your sort of paradigms and structures, and you're just you and reality. And you know what I mean? There's nothing separating you. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Definitely. And
You are.
I've had psychedelic experiences before with different ones, and DMT at that time, which is kind of like the component in ayahuasca and everything. I saw strange writing on the wall, and I actually went up to the wall and was like touching it, and it looked like some kind of different language that was like looked like an alien language. I don't know what it was, but
Yeah.
there were symbols, and it was like I saw them on the wall.
Yeah,
And I was like feeling it, making sure what the
yeah,
hell, you know.
yeah, exactly. So I asked the roadman, days later, I said, "Can you explain what happened to me?" And he just laughed and smiled. And I said, "I really want to know. Can you please just give me some idea of what happened?" And he said, You were a Navajo at one time, and this allowed you to remember that. You were one of us. In fact, he said, I'm going to give you a Navajo name. Asantlachi. This is really funny because it means Navajo woman with red skin, meaning I was sunburned all the time, so they called me a redskin, a Navajo redskin. I mean, that's a change in the. They're usually called redskin. I was called redskin because of sunburn. So he claimed that this was another life. I didn't know they believed in that, but he said, yeah, I was at one time a Navajo. What do you think of that? I didn't know what.
I think that's possible. I
possible.
absolutely believe in this past life regressions. I think that's a real thing.
I've had some weird stuff. I had something happen to me where I think I had a dream of a preacher and a native, and the preacher was reading the Bible and he hung the native. And sometimes I wake up with bad neck pain. And I'm not going to sit there and say I was a native in a past life. Maybe I was. I don't really know. But I've had some weird stuff like that for sure. It makes you wonder. I hope I wasn't the preacher. That's all I know. But when I'd done mushrooms before, and I did see natives standing in my room, and they were in full attire, and they said, "Call on us anytime when you need us." And it was like they were there, and I freaked out and ran outside.
No, that gives me goosebumps in a good way, in a really good way. And you should. I suggest you actually do call on them, the spirit in the spirit world, when you need help. Okay, I'm going to tell you something that happened when I went to med school. This is right up your alley. This, I'm more trained in sort of logic and science, so this forced a different. It forced me to open my mind because I experienced it. I can't pretend it didn't happen. But anyway, so it was my birthday, and I was in Boulder, Colorado, doing pre-med, getting ready to go to medical school. And for my birthday present, a friend gave me a gift certificate to a psychic. And, I'd never been to a psychic before. And she said, well, just keep your mind open and just see what the psychic says. And just enjoy yourself. This is your birthday. So I went there not knowing what to expect. And first she said, what would you like to ask me? And I said, well, I'll have to think because I don't really have anything. And then she said, you don't need help. I said, I don't? Are you sure I don't need help? She said, you've got somebody looking after you. I said, what do you mean? She said, behind your left shoulder, there's a Navajo grandmother. Oh my God. I mean, she knew nothing about me. Nothing. And this was years after I left the Navajo. I did go back as a doctor to serve them for another 2 years, but this was when I was just in my medical training. She said that there's a grandmother, Navajo grandmother, behind you and is looking out for you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Like a spirit or an actual person following you?
No, spirit.
Spirit. Okay.
I mean, but the psychic saw it as a real person.
Yeah.
But I translated it as a spirit. It was my translation. But she could see a real form. I mean, to say Navajo, you have to actually see somebody there to know it's Navajo, you know? So anyway, I think I know what grandmother it was. Are you up for another story? A very wild
Yes.
story? Okay, so remember I said I took the kids home every weekend to their remote, faraway homes? Well, there were 36 kids. There's 52 weeks in a year. So I had some weeks where I wasn't taking them home. So I would go on my four-wheel drive and explore this fantastic, gorgeous, phantasmagoric landscape, like out of another world. And I went to southern Utah, and it was very remote in those days. And I left the dirt road and I left the pavement and went for 40 miles in the dirt towards all these beautiful pinnacles and rock formations, red rock. It's just out of this world stunning. And I later realized when this was over that if my car broken down, I would have died because nobody would have come here for maybe a year. I was really in the middle of nowhere. But I didn't think in those terms because I was so focused on the magnificent countryside. I was just, wow. And I felt fearless. I was more afraid of people than I was of nature. I wasn't afraid of nature at all. And I felt really at home. And I drove and drove just blissfully. And a coyote ran across my path. And I remember the school kids, how they learned, one of the ways they learned English is trying to explain things to me. And they explained that if a coyote crosses your path like that, you should turn around and go home because it means something very bad is about to happen to you. And I thought about that. And then I brushed it off because I was so enchanted. There's no way I was going to turn around. So I brushed it off thinking, well, that's applies to Navajo culture. I'm a Bilagana. I'm a white person. And so maybe it doesn't apply to me. So I kept going. And then I found this beautiful, it looked like enclosure of rocks. And in the middle was like a natural bowl, like a cistern that had collected water. So I took off all my clothes. You know, there's nobody around for miles and miles. And so I wasn't afraid at all. And I splashed around in there and just was in total bliss. And then the sun started to go down. So I put on my clothes and I left my shoes off because I loved feeling the warm rocks. And then I realized it's time to get my sleeping bag set up because it's going to be nighttime, even though there was a full moon, so it's pretty bright. And so I got it all set up on a flat sandstone rock. And I got into my sleeping bag and just started looking at the moon and kind of humming songs to the moon. And then I finally fell asleep. And at some point when I was asleep, I had this dream that was so vivid. It was like real life. I was in Billy Begay's sheep pen, and we were trying to catch the billy goat so it wouldn't mate because then they'd have babies at the wrong time. You know, you have to control when they mate because otherwise, if they have babies in the winter, they'll die. And so we were chasing the billy goat. And in my dream, the billy goat had this horrendously strong smell that billy goats have when they want to mate. It's so acrid, it's almost painful. It's so strong. And I remember thinking, am I awake or asleep? This seems really real. And then I felt the rock on my. I felt the rocks. I think, oh my God, I'm awake. I'm not. I'm awake, and I could still smell that smell. And then I heard a sniffing sound, and I opened my eyes, and 2 inches from me in the full moon was a mountain lion smelling me. I could see his black whiskers, I could see his tawny snout, and I thought, oh my God, this is it. I'm finished. I closed my eyes. My heart was beating so fast. I was barely breathing, paralyzed with fear, waiting for him to claw me to death and eat me. And I just thought, hurry up, hurry up. I can't take it anymore. Hurry up, get it over with. And nothing happened. But I was too frightened to move or open my eyes until it was full daylight, not just dawn, full daylight. That's how terrified I was. And of course, when I got up, there was no tracks because this is on the sandstone. But when I stuffed my sleeping bag, that smell, it's called pheromones, that male animals have, like mountain lions and billy goats, it wafted right up my nose, and the hair stood up on my forearms, and it was just so frightening. So then I decided I need to go home. And so because I wasn't going to sleep out there another night. And so I drove to a gas station and filled up with gas and told the gas attendant what happened. And he said, ma'am, damn good thing you didn't move. Otherwise that cat would eat you alive. And so I thought, well, I guess I'm alive because I didn't move. But then I kept having dreams over and over about the mountain lions. So I drove the 2 hours to Gallup, New Mexico, and I went to their library. I checked out books on mountain lions to learn everything I could about them. And I talked to park rangers, zoologists, all sorts of people, and they all said the same thing as the gas attendant. The only reason why I'm still alive is because I didn't move. They don't like things that don't move. And so then I thought, you mean that's all it means, that I didn't move, and that's why I'm still here? And I thought, I think I'm missing something. And I kept reading, no, didn't get any clues. And then I dreamed over and over again that the mountain lion was trying to tell me something, and I didn't know what it was. So I told my teacher aide, Donna Scott, about it. She said, you should go talk to this teacher aide because she has a grandmother who will tell you what happened from her point of view. So the next afternoon after school was over, she took me in her four-wheel drive to see her grandmother, all wizened up with a little corncob pipe and lots of wrinkles. And I was just learning Navajo at that point, so I wasn't fluent, not even near. And she was telling her grandmother in Navajo, and then the grandmother looked right in my eyes and started talking Navajo and said, blah, 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 blah. And then the teacher aide translated. She said, grandmother said that this happened for a reason, that it was not by chance, and that the mountain lion is your spirit guide, and he had come to you to give you his courage, his strength, and perseverance, because you will need that, because you're going to face some life-threatening challenges. And if you live through them, you will have powerful medicine to give to people. And actually, that was 50 years ago, and that all came true. I had some terrible accidents. That's why my eyes don't work together. I had brain damage from being smashed up by a snowboarder. I had, and I had to overcome all those things, and it made me be an even better doctor. I mean, people start coming from all over the country, asking me to help them figure out medical mysteries that nobody knew how to diagnose or treat. And so it was uncanny. I mean, she made a prophecy.
Definitely fascinating for sure. What was the situation where there was a tumor and a medicine man?
Okay, yeah. Okay, so you did read the book, didn't you?
Yes,
Jeffrey?
indeed. Yes, indeed.
So, okay, so I have to give some background. There's not much iodine in Navajo's diet, so it's very common to get a goiter. That's when the whole thyroid swells, and it's from iodine deficiency. And So I one time felt something right here. It's not a goiter. It was just like a little rock right here. And I was very young. I knew nothing about medicine. And like my patients often do, they try to ignore things and think it's going to go away. So I thought, oh, well, this will go away. It got bigger and bigger, and I kept trying to ignore it. And then one of the girl students in the class, she said, Miss Elliot, you have a goiter. I didn't have a goiter, no, but meaning it was so big that everybody was noticing it. So I thought, oh my God, I have to go do something about it. So I drove to quite a ways away to the nearest charity hospital, Sage Memorial Hospital, and an internist saw me and examined me, and he said, "This doesn't look good. This looks like a lymphoma." And we're going to get a biopsy, but I'm pretty sure that's what you have because it's hard as a rock, it doesn't move, and it's growing. Those are all bad signs. And so he said, we can arrange a biopsy right now if you just wait here. So I was so frightened to be in this hospital and stuff. I just left and I drove back. I told my teacher aide that that I had this, and I didn't want anyone to cut on me. I was too frightened. And who would believe I'd end up being a doctor and cutting on people and doing all sorts of things? But that I was so young, 23, and so anyway. So then she said, I know somebody who could help you. There's a medicine man. And she gave me instructions, and they're typical Navajo instructions from that era. Listen to this. You go down the wash for a while, and then you'll come to sagebrush on the right. You turn there, and then a little ways down, you'll see 3 pinon trees. You go left there, and then, I mean, I got so lost. But finally I found this guy, and he was very nice medicine man. And he said, I'm so sorry, this isn't my specialty, but I know a Hopi medicine man. And so I searched and searched for that Hopi man. It took me all day. He was out herding sheep, an entire day to locate him. And he, to my sadness, said he couldn't help me either. So I just thought, oh God, I don't know what to do. I'm so scared. So my Navajo family said, no, we'll help you. That's not hard. We'll help you. We'll have a peyote ceremony for you. But since it's so expensive to butcher our sheep and pay the roadman, we'll share it with another family as a sick baby. And then we'll do that as a present for you. Wow, that's so nice of you. And so they did it. And they did the usual ceremony. It went all night, very intense. Every once in a while, you'd hear an English word like "Jesus help" and stuff like that. And but it was all in Navajo, and the singing and chanting and drumming and stuff, very emotional, very moving. And then the morning came, and we did our usual ritual with the feathers and stuff. And we went and had our breakfast, and I sat down, and I noticed nobody was eating. They were all looking at me. And I thought, why are they all looking at me? Why? And then I suddenly remember my hand went up like this, and it wasn't there anymore. And to this day, you might see me sometimes going like this, because for all these years, I just couldn't believe it. It was not there. And I keep feeling to see if it's come back after 50 years. Just can't believe it. But it disappeared. It was gone. What do you make of that?
Well, I have heard stories of that before, and modern science would probably say that it was probably something that they triggered in your own body that healed it. Everyone that was at the ceremony will say it was they that did it. I don't know. There's a lot of stories about that kind of what they might call it faith healing or alternative styles of healing. I think it's actually legit. What was it? One of those, believe it or not, TV shows. They actually showed an Indian shaman like excise of an actual organ from someone with just his hand. He didn't use a knife or a scalpel. He actually physically took a piece of tissue from inside of a person's body on a TV camera and pulled out this piece of live biology on TV. So I think there's something to it. I can't say there's anything wrong about it, but modern science doesn't like it.
I know. I know. I just to jump ahead, this isn't part of the book, but I was a mainstream doctor for 10 years, and I got so disenchanted because I felt like we weren't addressing the real problems. We weren't going beyond symptoms. People got a diagnosis and then didn't go any further. You just got a lot of pills. It was I was disgusted, and I thought this isn't what I searched 10 years for to find to be just a pill dispenser. And then Jeffrey, do you remember in the book when I came back as a doctor, I heard what they called white doctors, and I was so shocked. They called them a zetini, and I knew what that meant. It meant he who gives out pills. And I thought, oh my God, they really nailed us. They really, I mean, and I wanted to be, I wanted to use my brain and my heart to practice medicine. I didn't want to be a robot and give everybody the same treatment, not customize it, not get to know your patients, just treat symptoms, not even try to figure out why they have it. I thought that this isn't what I was looking for much of my life. So I left mainstream, and it was the best thing that I've ever done in my life. And it was 1993. And I started practicing using all the things that I had learned, not just mechanical things like this herb does that and this herb does that, but much more. I learned how to handle people's grief and suffering. I learned a lot of wisdom, and I could go very deep with patients. And so it's been incredibly rewarding. I'm 73, and I have no interest in retiring because I'm doing what I love. Whereas a lot of doctors that have a high suicide rate, they can't wait to retire. They're bored stiff. They're not using their native intelligence. They're just going by algorithms. You have this, you give that, and if it's that, you give this, and everybody gets the same algorithm. And so it's not that these are bad doctors, it's the system that is so broken. So broken.
Definitely corrupt for sure.
Yeah, I
and did the UFO subject ever come up any?
Yeah, there's people who've seen them. They were sheep herders, yes, absolutely, who saw them. But they didn't love talking about it. I don't know why, if they were scared or what, but I wanted them to talk about it. They didn't want to talk about it. I don't understand that.
Maybe they thought it would just bring more trouble to them if they talked about it or something.
Yeah, I think so.
Something like that. There's a great show on Hulu called Reservation Dogs that's about natives. That's really good. It's by the guy. I always have trouble saying his name. I hate even trying to say it, but Takiti Wakiti. He's New Zealander, and I know I just messed up his name, but he did that. He also did a show called What We Do in the Shadows, which is real funny about these vampires that live in a house together, and it's kind of like the Monsters or Addams Family or something. It's really good. But the show's called Reservation Dogs. If you ever get a chance to see it, and it has a lot of native actors in it, like Wes Studi.
Wes Studi.
Yeah, he's in it. There's a bunch of famous ones in it, and it's funny. They're only like 30 minutes a piece, but Deer Woman's in it. A Bigfoot. Like there's different things. It's funny, but they add like stuff like that to the stories and stuff. But it's really really good. I've heard stories from natives about like they would say if you see a bright light in the sky or land it in the woods, don't go to it because you won't come back.
Although that's not specific to Navajos, I've heard that by Navajos, but I think a lot of tribes say that.
And there's a woman, Artie Six Killer Clark, who writes books. She's been on the show. She has a book called Star Counters from Native Americans and another book from Sky People. and she goes around to tribes and gathers their UFO stories from them. And she went down to South America and was getting the stories there too. But she has these books just filled with different stories, and they're really good. One of the stories from some of the natives about water keepers, where a UFO will come to this certain people that are humans, I guess, and they'll get water from the river or whatever, and they called the people that, I guess, talk to the beings water keepers. So there's so much neat stuff with all that for sure. That
In South America, when I was in the Peace Corps in South America, I worked at 12,000 feet in the Andes with indigenous people who didn't speak much Spanish. I spoke fluent Spanish, but I had to try to learn their language, Quechua, which wasn't very hard. It's not like Navajo, but I never really learned it very well. And, they just took it. Those people down there just thought it was ordinary to see UFOs. They didn't think, you know, they took it right in stride, in other words, just part of life, UFOs. They totally accepted it.
and definitely, the UFO subject in our media right now is crazy. The way they're talking about it. I mean, they just made some kind of organization to study it more. They've had that before, but if you put in UFOs, Fox News on YouTube, or UFOs CNN, and just watch the anchor people for your own amusement, it's definitely fun to watch. Just seeing them
Well,
freak out about
some people get really upset because they don't want to believe it. They get angry. But I don't like that. I think I like it when people have an open mind, even if they're not on board, if they open to all possibilities. And I had to do that when I lived with the Navajos. I had to open my mind because I was seeing things that, my parents would never believe. And so
Yeah.
it really, that's one of the many wonderful things that happened to me on the reservation is my mind opened up.
Did the trickster subject ever come up? I know you said coyote. I love coyotes.
Oh,
So
the coyotes, yeah, that they're like the jokers. They have wisdom, but they trick you and fool you. But yeah, they're important in their whole mythology. The coyotes have a big role.
they're definitely those folklore stories are a trip. I've read those. I have those books where filled with the folklore stories of all
Yeah,
that. They get pretty crazy.
I
But love that stuff. And I know. And as far as I know what I was going to ask. Did Bigfoot ever come up ever with anything?
no, not with the Navos and not with the Quechua speaking people. I never heard them say that, but I'm very interested in the same things you're interested in. But I never I never was with people who'd encountered that. But I've heard of that in the Northwest.
Yes, they may have a different name for it or something.
Sasquatch.
Yes, or I know I have a book by Kathy Moskowitz Strain, and it's all the folklore from different tribes about giants and Bigfoot and stuff, and different ones call it different things, or there's different names, and might look different to one tribe and look different to another, different beings and stuff like that. I know in your book you mentioned the puberty ceremony.
Yeah.
What age did they start all that situation, and
That's whenever they get their periods, and for them it's not early like it is for white people. Like white people sometimes it's really early, unusually early, like 10 years old. That's like really early. For them it was like 13 or 14 was normal.
Did they do stuff like leave you in the woods and make you trip on something, or, or anything like that?
No, but they made you do all sorts of things. Like you had to do your hair a certain way, and you had to wear all your jewelry at once, and you had to run to meet the sun as it come up, and it was very complex, and you had to make food a certain way, and so forth. Yeah, it's very complex.
What kind? How was the food there? Did they have fry bread? I've never had it, but I want to try it. We're not going to make
Okay, let me tell you, fry bread was born in tragedy, and but then it took it. They liked it. So why am I saying that? Okay, on that long march, that horrible march to be imprisoned in an outdoor prison. They marched 400 miles. That's so sad. And all the Canyon de Chelly was destroyed, all their homes, and the peach trees burned down, sheep killed. And so when they were imprisoned in Bosque Redondo, which is now called Fort Sumner, far away from their homeland, the ones that survived, their women were raped, and people were just freeze to death or starved to death. So the ones that remained, they were kept in a compound, and they were given lard and flour, and that was it. Lard and flour. And so from the lard and flour, they figured out to make fry bread like that. And so it was born in heartache, but it took, and they became known for fry bread.
I'd like to try it one day for sure. What are some of the other food that they eat that?
Well, when I was there, they ate a lot of lamb and sheep, and some of them still grew their own stuff like squash, potatoes, beans, but they were moving away from that to rely on stores more. And canned peaches were really popular. This is 50 years ago. And now before the pandemic, there's so much eating of junk food because the people were so poor, they couldn't drive the 60 miles to a decent store to get decent food. So they just go to the one store that just sold complete crap. And so they were very vulnerable to the virus. They got hit terribly hard. And it's probably a lot to do with their living circumstances and their dreadful diet. But so it wasn't, when I was there 50 years ago, it was still pretty good, the diet. They didn't eat crap. And they really didn't. But that's gotten worse and worse with time, bad food.
Jay, you got anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I think I was actually going to ask about how the Navajo feel about how they were treated by the white folk way back when, because it's terrible things that we did to the American well, not the American people, but the American government.
They keep quiet to that, except for the young people speak out very readily, but the older people keep really quiet. And then when they befriend you and they trust you, then they'll tell you about the pain it's caused them, the horrible pain. I mean, I could tell you stories that would rip your heart out, like children being stolen. I mean, stolen by the missionaries to take them to the missionary schools where they were abused. Many died. They were treated badly. You heard the latest in the news, all those graves that were found near the former schools where hundreds of children died, like especially in Canada, it was really bad. And the government's talking about making some kind of reparations, although, I mean, it was so horrible, some of the things that happened, that they don't like to talk about it unless you become very close friends.
Yeah, it's got to be a painful subject. I mean, it's very similar to, if not the first event that was like what the Jews went through in World War II.
Yeah.
I mean, it was an attempt by the U.S. government to force them out genocidically by killing them.
Right. And the whole boarding school idea is to knock out the Indian in them and turn them into white people. And they were constantly punished. They actually literally put soap in their mouth. They were and girls were raped. I mean, it was so disgusting what happened. And stealing children from their family. That is just horrible.
It's not a great time. But I did also have another question about your book, because we've had this discussion with other shaman type shows, and my question is always where does the medicine come from? Because you get these folk tales that people tell us, like they tell us that the way marijuana was discovered is that Native Americans noticed certain animals frolicking in this certain type of plant. So they went and investigated the plant, and that's how they discovered that it was marijuana and it was a fun recreational drug or tobacco. So how do we find some of these natural drugs? I mean, there's so many plants on the planet. How do you just accidentally stumble upon the right herb or combination of herbs that cures this, that, and the other?
Well, the thing is, this is such ancient wisdom. This has already been discovered. So what we're doing is rediscovering it.
Mm-hmm.
And many of the people, the old people, are dead now. Like on the reservation, many of the people that pass on this very information you're talking about died from the pandemic. The medicine men and women they're a reservoir of that kind of information, because that's been passed on. That those medicines have already been figured out, and then they're passed on. But what's happening is they're not passed on because so many elders died.
Yeah, that's scary, because I would really like to know if there's a natural, because they keep saying about all these different vaccines for COVID. That you need to come back for a booster, or you need to get 2 shots in a row. Get your first shot now, and then one shot 2 weeks later, and then after 2 weeks after that, maybe you might not get it. But they don't seem to be working. So there must be something that medicine men could do to fight this. There's got to be an herb out there.
Listen, Jay, I'm not allowed to talk what I really feel because I lose my license. Somebody listening to this could report me to the board. So you'll have to use your imagination of what I would say. But I'll say this. This didn't need to happen. Mm-hmm. And then I'll stop it. This did not need to happen. That's as far as I can go.
Hey,
I have friends who've lost their license just by telling patients to take ivermectin. They've lost their license. So I don't want to lose my license. I love doing what I do. So that's why I have to watch my tongue. Now, if my license was taken away from me, I would tell you a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to mention on the show, there's a lady that I knew, Kirsten W. I believe she's Asian. She had a channel and she was friends with Roseanne, and she got a little kooky with the politics, but I share where I work at Before It's News because it's predominantly right wing. Me, I'm neither wing. I think both wings are crazy.
I'm neither either.
Me neither. But she passed away recently, and she would do shows with Roseanne and stuff like that. But I've noticed this weird thing with COVID. It seems like a lot of people that talk crap about it or the vaccine or whatever, they end up dead. Like, I've had a guest, Robert David Steele, who was former CIA. He was going around saying COVID wasn't real. He's dead. Like, I've had so many people.
You think he was? You think he was killed?
I mean, some people think that is possible, but I mean, they had a picture of him in the hospital on a respirator. That Kirsten girl, she was with a respirator. They always seem to get a picture of him on the respirator in the hospital, which is kind of creepy, and then it goes around. It's just weird. It's all weird. But she passed away recently, and she's on like BitChute and all that stuff. But of course, now they're saying she was murdered. There's a picture of her with the thing, but it does kind of seem like it goes after people that talk smack about it or something. That's kind of creepy.
That makes me really suspicious.
Yeah, it is. A lot of people are. But I just wanted to say rest in peace to her. She was always nice to me. She would come to where I work and thank me for sharing her videos. Not many people do that. So I hope she's in peace somewhere and wherever she went.
Okay,
to the afterlife.
I'm going to say one sentence and then change the subject.
Okay.
I think we're going to reach a point where we're going to look back and figure out what really happened. I mean, on every level, not just Wuhan lab. I mean, what happened. And once we figure out what happened and what's going on, I think everything's going to start making sense. But right now, we don't have all the pieces, so we're just speculating. But I think we're going to reach a point where we do have all the pieces, and then it's everything we've been witnessing will make sense. We won't like it, but it'll make sense.
Everything just seems still crazy as hell, no matter which way you slice it.
I know, but I don't think that's going to be forever, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I hope not. But My fiance, she didn't get the vaccine. I got it, but she has allergies and stuff, so I don't really
Yeah.
blame her.
No.
But I didn't want to get it, but I've already had testicular cancer and stuff. I don't really want COVID either. I've had enough bad stuff in
Yeah.
my life.
Yeah.
But then they're supposed to get a booster, which I don't really want to do. Who likes getting a shot anyway? I don't.
Mhm.
I don't. I went through chemo with needles, and I hate needles.
Yeah.
So
I understand, Jeffrey. What about you, Jay?
I did not get vaccinated, and now there's this thing that they're reviewing. I didn't watch the news today. They were supposed to review it, I guess, today in Congress. OSHA is trying to make every company in America that has more than 100 employees make their employees disclose their medical status as far as their vaccine, yes or no. And if we are not vaccinated, we have to get ourselves tested every week. So we have to basically give up our medical rights or the right to privacy for our medical procedures. So I'm not going to get vaccinated. I have no intention of it. And my job and OSHA have no business knowing whether or not I am vaccinated or not. It's none of their business.
Right,
It's between me and my doctor, really.
Right, Jay. And just know there are a lot of people fighting for people like you. Just know that.
Thanks. That's good to know. I mean, it's getting kind of scary. Am I going to lose my job?
No, there's a big
me,
Jay, there's a big fight going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so don't think this is. There's room for hope. In other words, okay.
That's what I'm hoping for sure. I'm not totally paranoid that I'm going to get gang tackled on the streets and then vaccinated by some rogue doctor.
it's possible. Fauci's coming for you, buddy.
Yeah, but even if it happens, it happens. But I don't think that's going to happen. What I don't want to happen is for Big Pharma and the government to get into my medical history without my express knowledge or permission.
Yeah.
And that's what this is a vote on. Is it?
Yeah.
Have you been vaccinated? Yes or no? That's a medical procedure that a medical person stabs you with a needle. Then you got to go take another medical procedure and tell us every week.
Jay, just let me tell you this, and then we should probably wrap up pretty soon, is that there are a lot of lawyers who are banding together to try and address what you're talking about. So there is room for hope. Don't despair, okay?
Well, I'm not despaired. It's a little bit scary, politically speaking, that this is going on. And I even actually said it a few weeks ago on another show that, we might see the next Civil War isn't about Black people versus white people, Native Americans versus Europeans. It might become between
freedom,
the vaccinated and the not vaccinated.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
We should probably wrap up pretty soon.
Yes, I was about to.
So, can I ask you something, Jeffrey?
Sure.
Who are your listeners? I'm kind of curious. Who are your listeners?
We get about 300 to 500,000. They're from here to from the United States to Europe. A lot of them in New Orleans. That's where the studio is, ran by Joe Montaldo. But usually it's about 300,000, 500,000.
You mean right now there might be 300,000 listeners?
Yes.
Did I say anything bad?
No, you're okay.
You're okay.
But everything's it's been great having you, getting this knowledge on the show. That's what the show's here for, and just talking about this kind of stuff definitely, I think, helps raise consciousness. So it's been great having you on the show. Do you want to give away a site, or where the best place to get?
I'd like to.
Okay.
So I have 2 websites people can visit. One, if they want to learn about the kind of medicine I practice, it's Erica Elliot with 2 L's and 2 T's, EricaElliottMD.com. But it's an inactive site. And what that means is I haven't been taking new patients for 5 years because I have 1,200 patients, which is way too much. And so it's an inactive website, but you can get an idea of the kind of medicine I practice. But what's more relevant to what your listeners' needs might be is the other website. It's called Musings, Memoir, and Medicine. Musings with an S, Musings, Memoir, and Medicine. And it's a mishmash of memoirs, because I'm working on my second memoir. There'll be 4 in all. And so I put some of the excerpts in there. But more relevant to your listeners is there's a whole series of medical posts. So if they click under categories and click medicine, it's all stuff that they'll learn that they won't learn from their mainstream doctor. really useful, practical things that address underlying problems. And that those blog posts have gone around the world. So I think they're useful. I do it as a public service because I can't see everybody who wants to see me. So that's why I do these blogs to try and make up for it and give really useful information.
All right. Well, we appreciate it so much and keep us in the loop in the future. If you do any other books, we've enjoyed it so much. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you both. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Have a good
Okay.
weekend.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. It's a good interview.
Yeah.
But as far as did you see Book of Boba Fett yet?
I have tried to watch it twice. But I've just been so late. It's like 3 or 4 in the morning, and I fell asleep. I haven't been able to make it through it. But I
You
heard
gotta watch it.
I heard that there's a throwback to Tatooine and to Luke's friends that he was going to go meet at Tashi Station in one of the current episodes. So I'm looking forward
There
to that.
is the story of how he survived the pit.
Yeah, I saw part of that, and then that's as far as I got. It's him getting out of the pit, and then
You gotta see. There's 2 episodes right now. It's good. I like it better than Mandalorian. I mean, I
Yeah.
like Mandalorian, but this one's more darker. He's in the underworld, the seedy underworld, and he's like a crime boss. He took Jabba's place.
Right. Yeah.
But,
I
but
got
I'm
that
not
one.
going to give too much away, but let's just say there's some more huts out there. More huts in the family.
I gather as much as he took over Jabba's palace, but
there's
yeah,
some
I
more
don't know.
huts.
I'm not expecting. I wasn't expecting to see any more huts, but that's fine.
There are. They're there. They're a family. So
Bunch of slimy worms on a desert.
But yeah, it's good. And then he's hanging out with the Sand People. Oh man, you got to watch it. You need to be awake to watch it. Watch those episodes, and it's so good. It's like he's like the mafia, Boba Fett. That dude that plays him is a New Zealander, and I always have to forget his name right now. But he was in a movie called We Were Legends or something. Wait. We Were Warriors or something, but it's about New Zealand Maori warriors, and it was crazy. New Zealand movie. I have it, and I've seen it, but my memory's terrible. It's called Once Were Warriors. And he was a dude in that, and his name is Tamara
Morrison.
Morrison.
Tamara Morrison. Yeah.
But one thing that I liked about him, born on December 26th, baby. That's right.
Yeah.
Capricorn. But if you ever see Once Were Warriors, it's this crazy gangs in New Zealand, and they're those warriors, and it's just poverty, alcoholism, and domestic violence, and it's just crazy as hell. It's one of the movies he was in a long time ago.
He came up in another movie that I've seen. I might be in my library, my DVD library, but it was after I had seen him as Jango Fett, Boba Fett, etc. And it's like I'm watching the movie, I'm like, hey, wait a minute, that's a young, the new Boba Fett guy, and yeah, he's pretty good. I don't know why he didn't. It's taken so long for him to get this show, but he should have been, in other bigger movies. You
gotta sit down when you're awake and watch those episodes, man. It's good. Yeah. It's good. I need some more. I like it. I like that. What is it? What is it called? Tatooine or
Tatooine.
That's where all this mafia stuff's going on with Jabba and stuff. That's what that place is called, right?
That's where Luke is from. Yeah.
There's pig warriors and all kinds of stuff. A lot of creatures in this, like a lot more creatures. That crazy band, the music band's in it.
Cantina band, yeah.
Yeah, they're in it.
I saw that.
all kinds of creatures, more creatures.
Well, it's also good to see that Max Rebo, the blue piano player, he survived Jabba's barge exploding. That was good.
Yeah, Matt Berry is the robot in it. That's like the one that says he's the one in the court of Boba Fett that talks.
Right.
Kill him, show power. That's that guy from What We Do in the Shadows, Laszlo, in the series. Oh. But it's good. And Robert Rodriguez directed the first episode. And that's the guy that did From Dusk Till Dawn with Tarantino and Desperado and all that and all that stuff. But yeah, it was really, really good. It surprised me. I've always loved Boba Fett. But definitely,
No, I mean they really punked him out. I mean, think about it. He's supposedly the most dreaded bounty hunter in the entire galaxy, and he gets punked out by a gaffy stick and gets knocked into a carnivorous pit.
who did it?
Well, that's a cop out.
Luke Skywalker did it, right?
Yeah, it looks like he hit him with that gaffy stick, and his backpack malfunctioned, and he knocked himself out on the side of the Jabba's barge, fell into the meat-eating pit, and
Kind of sucked.
that's the end of it. There should have been a much longer, protracted battle between Boba Fett and that whole group.
Beat this pig's ass if it doesn't leave stuff alone. Like, you just had food, and you're trying to open a container to get more food when you just had 2 scoops of food.
That's why they call them pigs.
They should not be pets, and it's just all I'm saying. I don't get it. And like, she's just all they think about is food. It's opening the thing. Hold on a second. Cut it out. Trying to knock it over.
I can hear it squeaking too.
Ow! It is squeaking, and it was trying to get in there. She's trying like hell. I'm still doing the show. Like 5 minutes left. But yeah, Book of Boba Fett, you definitely need to sit down when you're awake and finish it. That was some trippy Skinwalker stuff there.
Yeah.
So she thinks when you do the dastardly deed of murder, but it seems like to her the Skinwalkers only interacts with the Indians, the Navajo people, because it didn't seem like it was interested in whites, which may be different for different tribes that may, or different Skinwalkers or whatever.
Yeah.
But supposedly when you do the death-defying bad act, you turn into it right then. That's some crazy. Yeah. Like right there, you turn into it. Like you kill your whatever sister, and then you turn into this Skinwalker werewolf instantaneously. Like they seem supernatural, like they move between the veils or something. Because I've heard stories of them blowing stuff in your face, and they seem kind of like they have supernatural abilities or something weird for sure. To me, from the stories I've heard, but it's just weird to think that you turn right into it. That's crazy. Like you turn into.
The powder in the face thing isn't a new trick. I mean,
yeah,
different groups have used it for years and years. People have always thought that ninjas had like these bombs they would throw and it would make an explosion and all this fog would come. That's not what they had. What they would have is either very dry talcum powder or salt or sand or whatever really light powder they could carry with them, and they would throw it at your eyes. So it gets in your eyes so you cannot see them. Well, they didn't throw a bomb on the ground and go, ooh, I'm going to disappear into the night. No, it's silly traditions there.
Ross Lors is a guy me and Chip interviewed that had a run-in with him, and they did something to him that made him very sick. And it was a crazy story, but it seemed like they moved, they were real good at hiding and kind of seemed supernatural on some level. But,
the Skinwalkers?
Yeah, the Skinwalkers. Like they were kind of like dressed in furs and kind of weird, like hiding in the shadows, and did something with powder to him. Some kind of made him sick. He almost died, and they had to give him medicine to help him and stuff like that. Definitely some craziness. I didn't, that was definitely some trippy stuff.
Yeah, a lot of the pictures of the Skinwalkers show them actually wearing some sort of leather, or that's the animal of some other skin. Maybe even the person who made them into the creature they are.
Yeah, it was definitely a trip. Oh, sure. Don't kill any family members. Don't kill your friends. You'll turn into a Skinwalker. You'll be like a Davy Crockett werewolf. A raccoon hat.
That sounds too frontierism. Yeah, no, I don't want to be that.
It's not good. You don't want to be one. You don't. I mean, what are the perks? I wanted to ask if there's a boss. Do they have a boss?
Yeah. Who do I report to, and how much do I make weekly?
Yeah, remember the Starborn sister said the dark side pays me weekly.
Yeah.
Yet I'm poor. I'm lucky I'm scraped 1,000 or 2 a month for my job. I get 100 every 6 months from a banner from Intertraditions. I guess they're the dark side. Ooh, dark side don't pay for S, man, for sure. They don't pay you anything. Like $100 every 6 months. The dark side sucks.
They're making all those giant Death Stars. They can't be giving out money.
Yeah. And It's like Alfred Weber and Basago when I said I didn't believe the Obama time traveler story that I worked for the Satanist dark cabal because I don't agree that Obama tripped and went through a portal and hung out on Mars. So I'm evil, and because I don't believe that story. But and it could be true, but I doubt it. Sounds like BS to me. But anyway, but the Starborn sisters, that's what the fact I get paid weekly by the dark side. The guy that's always looking at his PayPal, like, oh my God, I need to get paid soon. So for some reason, I guess that somebody owes me a back check somewhere. Idiots. Book
They
of
they
Boba
just
Fett.
announced they just announced in Maryland that the state of Maryland has just found a $6 billion with a B dollar tax revenue overage.
Crazy.
So somehow over the last several decades, maybe even possible centuries, maybe not centuries, but for a very long time, they've been collecting either too much from most people or not giving the proper returns to people.
Pig.
$6 billion surplus.
All
Can you
right,
believe
dude.
that?
I got to get to this pig again. We got
Oh
that
God.
Les on aliens next week, and then Christopher Golden, New York Times best-selling author, the next week.
Cool.
All right, dude. Have a good weekend. Watch Book of Boba Fett. I got to get this pig. It's getting into a bag. Everybody have a good weekend.
All right.
Good night,
Thanks, Jeff. We'll
everybody.
see you.
Watch out for pigs.
Yep.
Forks.